Well, welcome back to the channel, Old Cars New Van, and yes, it's Maia. This is my first video going solo, so please be gentle. What I thought I would do is copy one of the sort of videos that Mike did about all the cars of his life and show you the cars that I've owned and the periods which they covered. Now, unlike Mike, I haven't had anywhere near as many cars, so again, this may be a shorter video. But my first car that I actually learned to drive in was this red Rover Metro. It was of its time, and to be frank, I absolutely hated it. The clutch was so high and so heavy, which is horrendous, but it was a useful little car to get through my driving test. We're probably talking 1992, and yes, it was a good starter car, wasn't it? The visibility was very good, obviously, because there's lots of glass in cars that age, you know, thin pillars, as you're aware. But no, I didn't particularly care for the car, although I did keep it about 3 years because, again, being a first car, it was of its time, both in terms of confidence and also finance. But in 1995, I fancied a change, and I moved up to a silver Honda Civic. It wasn't particularly newer than the Rover Metro, maybe only a year or so newer, but it was a much nicer vehicle. It felt like you'd got a lot more metal around you, if that makes sense. And again, that really increased my confidence as far as longer drives were concerned. Motorway driving, which again, you'd have avoided like the plague in the Metro. And yes, that was a really solid and reliable car, as Hondas have a reputation for being. And I kept that car a couple of years until 1997. I just fancied a complete sort of fun car, a complete change, older, with this Mark 1 MX-5. And no, you're not seeing double. This isn't Keith. This isn't the car you know on this channel. This was my very first Mazda MX-5. I'd moved jobs, I'd moved city. I was living more in the country, and I just needed a fun car, and this absolutely fitted the bill. And this really started the love of MX-5s. Really, really nice. Only kept it about a year. The only reason being, again, because of job circumstances, I needed just a little bit more comfort, a little bit more usability. But I still absolutely loved the driving of the MX-5. And that led me to buy this silver Mark 2.5 MX-5. And you can see I'm a fan. I bought this in 1998. I kept it a very, very long time. I actually kept this for 7 years until 2005. And therefore, I did an awful lot of driving, obviously, in those 7 years. Probably even to this day, the car I've owned the longest. And it's interesting because although underneath there are great similarities between, you know, Mark 1 and Mark 2 MX-5s, actually out on the road, the Mark 2.5 as a daily driver is a lot more comfortable, has got a lot more creature comforts. It does feel a lot more modern somehow than the Mark 1. Even though my current car, as you'll know if you watch this channel regularly, is a Mark 1 MX-5. My mileage is so low, so it works perfectly. So, as I say, that takes us to 2005 with, again, change of circumstances, change of job, needed even more of a practical car, and I went Audi A3. Competent, perhaps a little dull, but, you know, nicely built. Audis were nicely built in those days. And again, a reliable car. I did a lot of miles again in this vehicle, kept it for 5 years. So we're now up to 2010. It was fairly unremarkable ownership experience. Nothing, you know, significantly to report with regards to enjoyment. It was just functional and practical, and it just worked. So that, as I say, that brings us to 2010. And I actually had a break from driving between 2010 and 2015, only because I was living in a city centre using public transport. I just had no need actually for a car. So when I came back to driving in 2015, I wanted something very simple, very easy, very sort of city orientated to get confidence back. And to be frank, nothing that expensive either. So I actually bought a fairly rare car, a Subaru Justy. Yeah, there's not many of these. It's very similar, it's badge engineering, it's very similar to the Daihatsu Sirion. They were all sort of homologation cars, 1 litre petrol engined. I think it's the same engine that's in a Citroen C1, Toyota Aygo. It's all just borrowed from Toyota, and I think a lot of these were made particularly by the likes of Subaru as sort of emissions compensation for their other more polluting cars at that time when manufacturers were judged on the overall fleet, as it were, as to how their emissions were stacking up. Anyway, it was a useful little car for a city bug, and I razzed around in that for a couple of years, maybe 2017. And then I just wanted something a little bit bigger, again, still city orientated, but perhaps just a little bit larger for longer trips. I ended up buying a Honda Jazz, which is very reliable, very functional, and very boring. I used to call it Kettle because I seem to remember the reg number ended in KTL, and it was about as functional and useful as a kettle, the car equivalent of boiling water. But yeah, it was fine for what I needed. And then again, a change of job, change of circumstances again, meant my mileage was way down. So I returned to my roots and my passion of Mazda MX-5s and bought with Mike, as you know, Keith, which is still on the fleet, bought in 2020 and have obviously had him ever since. Fantastic little car, really fun. My third MX-5, so you can tell how I like the brand. And yeah, that brings us bang up to date because that was my last car purchase in 2020, and now look at us now, 2025, and still got it with no plans or intentions to change. So that is my car history. As I said at the start, a lot shorter than Mike's. That's probably a good thing, but hopefully this is a little bit of interest, and it just gives me the opportunity to put a video out onto the channel just solely in my name. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and look out for further videos on the channel very, very soon. Thanks again.